Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope everyone's doing well. So I'm back today actually with a contest entry. This is a thread which has been going around. I've been watching loads of people's responses. This is a contest put on by Metal Marty Mac, who's just recently reached 600 subscribers. So that's a fantastic achievement. Well done, Marty. And I remember it was only a couple of months ago, it seems like 5 minutes ago, when you ran your 400 subscribers competition. So the channel is very fast growing, and rightly so, because Marty's a great guy from Ireland, my island. So a reference to movies, which is what this video is about. That's of course from Braveheart. He's got a really impressive collection of all genres of metal, and he also really likes movies, as do I. So that's what this contest is about today, to celebrate his reaching 600 subscribers. The concept behind the contest is very interesting. It's something I can relate to a lot, so I'm going to enjoy answering this. What he's asked us to do is show bands' album titles or song titles which have the same title as movies. So I've included a few of those in my response, but I've also included some songs based on horror movies, or movies. So they don't necessarily have the same name, but the song is based on it. So Dave from Cavernous Carnage made a video like that, and I really enjoyed his response, so mine's going to be the same. Some actual titles, and then some songs or albums based on movies. So you'll see as the video unfolds. Alright, so I have a few to talk about, so let's get started. Okay, so with the movies, I have to add, I don't own all of them, but I'll tell you which one I'm referring to. So the first movie I'm going to talk about is Creepshow. That was one of the first horror films I ever saw, and it's a classic series, you know, short stories. I think part 1 has 5 and part 2 has 3. After that, they're not really essential, but anyway, from Creepshow 1, there was the story entitled Something to Tide You Over. And this Autopsy album contains the song Gasping for Air. So I know Gasping for Air comes originally from Severed Survival. I don't actually own that, but this is from the Autopsy compilation, Torn from the Grave. So the song Gasping for Air is based on that Creepshow episode, Something to Tide You Over, where Leslie Nielsen kills people by burying them up to their necks in water and lets the tide come in. That's what this song is about. The lyrics are really brutal, and it's just done so well. And of course, in the story, the people who are killed come back to life as zombies and get their revenge on Leslie Nielsen. But brilliant lyrics, so brutal in this song. So Gasping for Air, that's my first one by Autopsy. That's based on Creepshow 1. Okay, so the next film I'm going to talk about, a classic in the genre, and Marty also showed this, Evil Dead. See, I have I think 3 versions actually, but I gave one to my brother. But Evil Dead, just a classic zombie film which came out in '84. This is the original. I think a lot of bands have based their lyrics and concepts behind this movie. It's probably my favorite horror film of all time. So the albums I'm talking about, of course, Death wrote the song Evil Dead, so that has the same name. Believe it or not, I don't own that album, Scream Bloody Gore, in original format, but this band, Nocturnal Breed, a black thrash band from Norway, they did a cover of Evil Dead on this album, Aggressor, which I mentioned in my covers thread from Ron Haggerty. It's one of my favorite covers of all time. So Nocturnal Breed covering Death's Evil Dead, which is based on the movie. And also this Unleashed album, As Yggdrasil Trembles, that also contains a cover of Evil Dead. So so both covering the Death song, and of course it's based on the horror film Evil Dead. So that's my second choice. All right, next movie I'm going to talk about, this is the sequel, Evil Dead 2. So this is like the rewritten script, like the story changed slightly to make it not as slow moving. It's also very entertaining. Parts 1 and 2 are great. So is part 3, Army of Darkness. But yeah, a couple of songs based on this movie. They don't have the same title, so I'll just get into those now. So first of all, Devil's Whorehouse, which is a horror punk tribute band, including Morgan and B-War from Marduk, which I've spoken about this album before. This album has a song called Swallow Your Soul, which is based on Evil Dead, or Evil Dead 2 specifically. That's where the saying comes about. You know, when Henrietta goes, "Hey, I'll swallow your soul, I'll swallow your soul, swallow this." Yeah, so that's a brilliant song, and you can clearly tell that the song is based on the movie because it contains samples from Evil Dead, and it also contains the chorus says chainsaw, shotgun, flying arrows. So yeah, that's based Swallow Your Soul by Devil's Whorehouse. based on Evil Dead 2. And of course, also this Mortician song from Domain of Death, the last track, Necronomicon Ex Mortis. So that is based on Evil Dead 2, specifically Evil Dead 2, because in part 1, the Book of the Dead is referred to as Nocturon de Monta. So some nerds trivia there for you. But yeah, so this is based on Evil Dead 2, and it also contains the sample from the movie with the summoning and incantations of the dead to wake the dead. Yeah, so these 2 albums here, based on Evil Dead 2, or songs from those albums, so yeah. Now, the next movie I'm going to talk about, I can't believe I don't own this anymore. It's because the DVD scratched, so I just threw it out. But the movie I'm talking about is Predator, one of my favorite Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, and I know other people have referred to it in their responses. Disclaimer, this video contains some rather explicit artwork, so look away if you're easily offended. But this Torture Killer album, For Maggots to Devour, contains a song entitled No Time to Bleed. So you remember that famous scene in the Predator movie when the guy says to Blaine, "You're hit, man, you're bleeding," and he goes, "I ain't got time to bleed." This song actually contains a sample from that scene in the film, and it's a song about, you know, basically shooting up everything that moves in the scenario of war. So it's a very morbid concept. I don't take it seriously, but obviously it's based on the movie. And it also contains, because this band was heavily influenced by 6 Feet Under, there's even a tribute lyric in that song which is "Die motherfucker, die, die, die," which came from the 6 Feet Under song No Warning Shot. But yeah, this song No Time to Bleed, so that's what it's all about, and the sample is actually taken from Predator. So that's Torture Killer with No Time to Bleed. Now the next one, this will be an obvious choice, and I'm sure other people are going to refer to it, but I have to as well because it's one of my favorite horror films. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, so which the original version came out in 1973 or 4. Yeah, the original is the best, of course, directed by Tobe Hooper, like kind of a slow moving one, but it's so scary and disturbing and it's kind of realistic. But yeah, I've just always loved this film. It used to scare me so much when I was younger, but yeah, it's just remained a cult classic. But of course, the ultimate horror movie band, Mortician, talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So again, these albums don't actually include the title, but they're heavily based on it. So first of all, Mortician's Hacked Up for Barbecue. So the lyrics are all based around the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, actually in that song, and they also include a sample from that film as well, so from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. As everyone knows, Bill mentioned this in his thread, Mortician are the kings of horror film references. Basically, all of their concepts, lyrics, everything are based around horror movies. So, you know, like in the early days, people used to say death metal is the musical equivalent of a horror film. Mortician took that one step further and included samples from the horror films, based songs around the horror films, and actually the lyrics describe what happens in the horror film. So there's so many samples, so many references from movies, but yeah, the song I'm talking about on this album is Hacked Up for Barbecue, based on Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There are so many other horror films they refer to in this. Just on that note, one of my other favorites from this album is Witch's Coven, which is based on the Italian horror film Suspiria. Creepy and scary. I love that film. I wish I owned a copy. And the song Witch's Coven, it even includes a sample from that movie, you know, with the xylophones or glockenspiel, you know, that creepy, haunting intro and that whispered witch. Like, it gives me the chills. So great movie and great song reference. And I'd like to get that movie, Suspiria. And of course, yeah, in Mortician's later album, Chainsaw Dismemberment, yes, it's also based around Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I think this includes a sample from Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. So yeah, Mortician, but there are so many other examples, which you will see in time. All right, so up next, going to the vinyls now. Let's stick on Mortician because we're still there. This album, Zombie Apocalypse, I've used this in quite a few threads, so that's just coincidental. But this EP contains 2 songs which actually have the horror film name. So look on the back here. So yeah, track 4, Slaughterhouse. That's based on the horror film by the same name, about a deranged family which goes around slaughtering, killing people in an animal slaughterhouse. There's that, you know, Neanderthal guy with the axe buddy and the crazy father with the white hair. I actually watched this about 20 years ago. It was quite good. And I got interested based on that. So based on this album. So Slaughterhouse, referring to the movie by the same name, and also track 5, Hell on Earth. So that's clearly based on Hellraiser. And I think the subcaption or subtitle of one of the Hellraiser movies is Hell on Earth. Is it part 3? I think part 2 is Hellbound, but part 3 is Hell on Earth, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yes, obviously classic horror film, and they include samples of that. All the lyrics are based around it as well. So yeah, they're my 2 choices from this EP, Slaughterhouse and Hell on Earth, which actually have the same name as the movies. Incidentally, this contains references to a lot of other horror films, like as I've mentioned, Devoured Alive refers to the horror film Eaten Alive. And one of my favorite songs actually on this is Blood Harvest, which is based on Children of the Corn, and it even includes that creepy intro and outro, you know, the choral film score from that movie. Yep, so that's my next choice. So those 2 songs, Slaughterhouse and Hell on Earth, from Mortician's Zombie Apocalypse. All right, up next, the next film I'm going to mention, RoboCop. This is one of my favorite movies of all time, just a classic sci-fi action film from the 80s. And the good thing about this movie is I just don't get sick of it. Even these days, it just seems so relevant in terms of the way society is developing and everything. So I think it was way ahead of its time, and just a brilliant movie, full of action, so many great one-liners, and of course, it stars, what's his name? Peter Weller. He's Murphy, or RoboCop. Nancy Allen is Lewis, but in my opinion, the actor which makes this film is Kurtwood Smith, who plays the criminal gang leader, Clarence Boddicker. Just so many classic lines mentioned by him, but it's such a thoroughly enjoyable movie. So RoboCop. But anyway, the song based on that movie, this is Cancer with To the Gory End. They have a song called Into the Acid, and which is about someone melting and corroding in a vat of toxic waste. And I remember when I was 14, this was one of the first death metal albums I ever heard, and I remember reading the lyrics, and it says, "Your criminal friends have left you now." And I thought, that sounds like something out of RoboCop. And in this reissue of this album, I read the liner notes, and they actually mentioned, the band mentioned, sorry, battery going there. Yeah, the band actually mentioned that that song was based specifically on RoboCop. So they went and saw it at the cinema, because this was the late 80s, and they were so inspired they wrote a song by it, about it. So there you go, Into the Acid is based on RoboCop. Great song as well with the riffs. And incidentally, the title track of this album, To the Gory End, is also based on the horror film Hellraiser. So that's a very influential horror film for death metal bands. So To the Gory End, and I love that line in the song, "See the masters of gore stricken with pain in hell." Great riff, yeah. All right, so coming up next, that has taken us through all of the albums, songs, and bands based on horror films. So now Marty said for the second part of this video, he would just like us to show some of our favorite films in general, or favorite soundtracks. So I can definitely do that. If you watched my response to Dennis' Analog Archives video, I already referred to some of these films, so sorry about the duplication, but anyway, we'll go ahead. So first of all, let's talk about my favorite movie of all time is Killing Zoe, which is a movie, it was produced by Quentin Tarantino and written and directed by Roger Avary, who co-wrote Pulp Fiction as well. So this is a classic 90s action film starring Eric Stoltz and Jean-Hugh Anglade. What's his name? Jean-Hugh Anglade. Yeah, but just a brilliant film. It's about a group of guys who decide to rob the National Bank of France on Bastille Day, but they have a night of drugged and drunken debauchery beforehand. They're in a really bad state when they go into the bank, so everything just goes wrong from the word go. But if you like heist and bank robbery movies, it's absolutely brilliant. And the way they sort of draw this movie out, there's a romance tied into it, but it's just so action-packed, set in France. And as my brother said, when you watch this film, it makes you feel like you're in France, the whole feeling and the atmosphere, but just such a brilliant movie, and it's high energy and action-packed. So Killing Zoe, directed by Roger Avary, check it out. Okay, now, another one of my favorite movies of all time is Big Trouble in Little China, which I also mentioned in Dennis's thread response. So if you haven't seen this movie, just go and see it. It is a combination of martial arts, action, fantasy, and comedy. Like, some of the lines and the segments in this movie are just so hilarious. So it's brilliant. I've loved this movie ever since I was a kid, and I don't get sick of it. I still laugh when I watch it today. And yeah, so I strongly recommend it. The funny thing about this movie is, even though I've seen it hundreds of times, when I show someone new, you know, like this movie, who's never seen it before, it's always interesting to see which parts they laugh at, because inevitably they will at some stage. But it's just pure entertainment. Brilliant movie, Big Trouble in Little China. Okay, and then another one of my favorite films is Dead Heat. This is a B-grade action horror film starring Treat Williams and Joe Piscopo. It's made in 1986. It's about some detectives who investigate a case of these zombies robbing jewelry stores, and when people shoot them, they don't die, so they try to get to the bottom of it. And it's brilliant. It's action-packed, and because of Joe Piscopo, it contains some really hilarious one-liners. And I know a lot of people say that he's cocky, but he's so funny in this. Some great one-liners such as, "You're under arrest, you have the right to remain disgusting," and "But it would be nicer if you could earn it by nailing the rest of these cash and dash fuckers to the wall with a 12-inch railroad spike." Yeah, so lines like that. Also starring Treat Williams, rest in peace. Very sadly, he passed away, you know, not long ago due to a motorcycle accident, I think. But yeah, very sad about that. He was a great actor, but this is a brilliant film. If you like B-grade horror trash, check it out, Dead Heat. And lastly, this is one of my favorite movies of all time, Conan the Barbarian, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. As I've mentioned before, the acting in this is pretty wooden, and it's, I don't think it's supposed to be taken too seriously, but it's a fantastic epic tale. So much atmosphere in the filmography and the screenplay. And what really makes this movie, of course, is the soundtrack, which is absolutely epic. So this is a fun adventure film. You know, I think for all walks of life. I really never get sick of this movie, and I was always impressed, even as a kid, by the soundtrack. So I actually bought the soundtrack a few years ago. Cool. Do you want to live forever? I don't know, I can't remember her name. But yeah, so this is the classic soundtrack. It's an epic classical soundtrack, like containing a lot of choirs and choral arrangements, and it just makes the movie so epic and huge. And I think this soundtrack actually influenced a lot of black metal bands with their sound, particularly Graveland on Creed of Iron, as well as Manowar, Bathory, and so on. But great film and soundtrack, Conan the Barbarian. Alright, so that's it, guys. That's my entry for this contest. So I hope you enjoyed the entry, and sorry that it's gone on a bit long, but I just felt I couldn't exclude any of these releases. So once again, Marty, congratulations on reaching 600 subscribers. I hope you enjoyed my entry, and I will also leave a link to Marty's channel below in this video, so you can go and check out his channel if you haven't. Alright, so that's it, guys. I'll be back again soon with the next update. Not sure when, but relatively soon. But in the meantime, take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.